Hey everybody, it's Holly here today for Your Next Stamp, and today I'm going to be creating this cute little Valentine card. We're going to be using a throwback stamp set, the Waddles Winter Stamp Set and Coordinating Die. I'm also going to be using the Stitch Scallop Rectangle Die Set, along with the Silly Love Monster Stamp Set from the latest release. And then I'm also going to be using the double-sided Stitch Hillside dies to create my little scene. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I start out by die cutting two of the second largest scalloped rectangles from some watercolor paper, and then I'm going to use one for my background, and then I'm going to use one to create two of the little hillsides to create the bottom part of my scene. So I'm going to use the large hillside die, and then I'm going to use the extra part of the paper to create the second hillside and just tuck that down behind the original one. Now this video is sped up in certain parts because it was very long, so just kind of bear with me here. And this is the first video I've made since October when I had nasal surgery. So I've been out for a while, so just kind of bear with me as I get my bearings back. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure everything lines up properly, and then we're going to get into the actual fun part here. So I'm going to be using some Peacock feathers and Salty Ocean Distress Oxide ink. And on the second watercolor panel there, you can see I've already started. I'm adding the Peacock feathers or the ink down to the mat, and then I'm picking it up with a piece of acetate and then putting it on. And then I'm going to heat set in between each layer. And I'm starting with the Peacock feathers first because it's lighter. And then once that's dry, I'm going to go ahead and repeat the same process and smoosh the Salty Ocean into the pad, add a spritz of water, and pick it up with the acetate. And then I'm going to heat set that as well. And then once that's dry, I'm going to go ahead and use my sprayer bottle nozzle there and just flick some water droplets on and pick those up with a paper towel, or you could heat set it. Either way is fine. This just creates a fun little background. Then I'm going to go ahead and use my mini Misti and a piece of Copic Express blending cardstock. And I'm going to stamp my images out using the Your Next Stamp Black Olive ink. This is a Copic friendly ink. I'm going to stamp the two Waddles that are kissing, and then the moi little speech bubble. I'm going to go ahead and get started with my Copic coloring here. Now this is definitely sped up very quickly. I'm going to go ahead and go over the colors I'm using. So for my penguins, I'm using N10, N8, N6, N4, and a little bit of N2. And you may notice that I take the both ends off of my marker, both of the caps. That's because sometimes with these darker colors, they tend to bleed a little bit. I'm not really sure why. Sometimes you can get a big wad of ink that bubbles out. If you take both of the caps off of your marker, you'll notice that the tip isn't as juicy and you have less of a chance of getting one of those bubbles. It kind of even outs the air pressure inside your marker. So again, for the bodies of the penguins, I'm using the ends. Then for their bellies, I'm using Y32, YR30, and YR23. And then for the hats, I'm using a little bit of BG11, BG45, and BG49. And then for the pink hat, it's RV10, RV21, RV00, RV23. And then for the penguin's nose and their little feet, I'm using YR04 and YR12. And then I have a little spot where I left the white part on the hat that I use C3, C1, and C00. So those are the colors that I use to color my images in, and that'll be listed down in the description box as well. Once my images are all colored in and ready to go, I'm going to go ahead and use the coordinating dies and my Sizzix Big Shock to cut them out. And then I'm going to go ahead and start assembling my background, but before we do that, I want to go ahead and stamp the sentiment on the outside part of that little hillside. Now, instead of cutting my stamp or altering it, I'm going to go ahead and just mask off the part of the sentiment that I don't want to show. So I'm a little bit off camera here because I have to kind of get a little close to see what I'm doing, but I'm using the sentiment that says, "I've got a monster's crush on you" from the Silly Love Monster stamp set, but I'm going to eliminate the monster, which is in the center. So I'm adding some washi tape over the parts I don't want inked up, and then I'm just stamping the crush on you part first. And then I'm going to go ahead and move that little white piece of paper up to the top. And then I'm going to line the stamp up again, just using the top part that says I've got a. And then I'll repeat the same process again with the washi tape to cover up the part that I don't want to show. Now it's important to remember when you use washi tape, don't forget to take the washi tape off before you stamp, or you get a big old black blob. I've done this many times, that's how I know not to do that. The other thing you could do is you could also trim your stamp to cut the sentiments apart, or you could use a piece of post-it note with a sticky back to cover up where you don't want to. The washi tape is a little bit easier, and you just pull it off in between each time you press down. Once my sentiment is all set up, I'm going to go ahead and start assembling the card. So I'm going to go ahead and tape the two hillsides together using the advanced tape gun from Scotch. And then I'm going to adhere that directly onto that little watercolor panel that I created. And then I'm going to add some foam adhesive to the back of my penguin and the little moi speech bubble to pop them up a little bit. And then I've got a piece of a tealish colored cardstock here that I'm going to use as my background. This A2 size cut at 4 1/4 by 11, and I'm going to score it at 5 1/2. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a stenciled background using a stencil from Newton's Nook. This is a Falling Heart stencil, and I'm going to be using Your Next Stamp's Totally Teal ink and a little stencil brush to apply the color. You could also use an ink blending tool if you want for this as well. So I'm just going to lay the stencil down over my card, and then I'm just going to go ahead and lightly brush over with the stencil. Depending upon the pressure you use, how much ink you use, you can vary the gradient or the shading of the hearts through the stencil there. As you go along stenciling, just lift up the edges there to see where you are. You could also tape it down too if you're not comfortable just holding it there. I'm going to go ahead and add some foam tape to the back of the image panel, and then I'm just going to pop that down in the center of my cardstock, and that pretty much finishes up my card for today. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Be sure to stop back again next month for another Throwback Thursday. Have a great rest of the week, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.